my name's Merope. Welcome to Tortoise. Welcome to our newsroom. If you haven't been here before, I see some familiar faces who have. But if you haven't, welcome to a ThinkIn. I'm going to have to do my spiel. I'm sorry if you've heard this before, lots of people. But I do need to say that a ThinkIn is not a panel event. It's a system of organised listening based on a news organisation news conference where we would take an interesting topic of the moment and invite expert guests who know about it to come and talk and give us their views. But actually, they work best when we hear from as many people in the room as possible. So we do want you to talk, but we do have one rule, which is no questions. We want to hear from you, but we want to hear your thoughts and ideas and interesting take on the subject. So that would inform our point of view and the journalism that we would then subsequently do on it. So please do talk up. A bit of housekeeping before we start. Please turn off your phones if you haven't already. We do film our events. Have to let you know we film them these little cameras here in case we want to do an edit and share them with members or people who couldn't be here on social media. And this tortoise going across the screen here is a timer. She's called Agatha, named after our founder's tortoise called Agatha, his pet tortoise. But one of my colleagues said that in honour of Colleen Rooney, I should call her Wagatha tonight. If you don't get that, I'm really sorry, but it was too good a joke not to go with. So do keep an eye on the timer and stick your hand up to let me know you want to say something, and I will come to you because the hour goes quicker than you think. I'm now going to introduce our guests. On my right here, I have Bella Mackie, who is a writer and a fashion lover, and I've wondered how to put this because I don't want to call you the I word, influencer. I'm not going to call you that. I'm not calling you that. But I'm going to say you take a lot of photographs of yourself wearing nice clothes on Instagram, and people ask you where they're from. And that's a thing that happens in your life. Yeah. I've got over here. I've got Annick. Is it Annick Ireland? Yes. And she is the founder of Immaculate Vegan, which creates vegan fashion brands. And yes, that is a lovely vegan dress she is wearing.
Everything's vegan.
Everything's vegan. There you go. And we'll come to that in a bit. And Roberta Lee, who is a sustainable stylist. Bella, I'm going to put you on the spot. I'm going to come to you first. Sorry. I invited you to this because I follow you on Instagram, and back in, I think it was either end of August or start of September, you said, I'm trying not to buy any new clothes for a while, and this photo is my marker. I've got two questions for you. Number one, how's that going, in all honesty? And number two, how has being on Instagram affected your sort of clothes buying?
So number one, honestly, it's been more successful than I thought it would be and less successful than 100% success rate. And I can't lie because my husband's here and he'll laugh at me. So I think it was a place marker that I hadn't completely thought about, because then I realised I have to buy a winter coat and I have to buy, waterproof shoes to walk the dog and blah, blah, blah. And I think my main problem is that I use fashion to make myself feel better when I'm anxious or sad. And so whenever I have a stressful period, that's kind of my go-to. I think lots of people have that in different ways, but especially with fashion. So it's gone better than I thought, and I'm sort of going to try and be more strict and stick to it better. But then I worry that maybe accessories is cheating, so I didn't define the parameters strictly enough.
What was your motivation for saying it? Because a lot of people did it around that time. Just a quick shout. Is anyone else on this sort of? I think it was a movement, wasn't there?
Stop Secondhand September.
Secondhand September. Anyone else part of that here? A couple of people here.
Well, sort of question one leads into question two, which is, I think, being on Instagram and having people offer to send you lots of stuff, you realise that you are slightly drowning in crap, to put it bluntly, which is a lot of, polyester nonsense that you're never going to wear, that someone wants you to wear once and then, sod it, throw it away or whatever. And I just felt slightly like I wanted to downsize everything. So I sold a lot of things, and I just thought... So Instagram has made me think more about sustainable fashion, actually, because Instagram is such a platform for highlighting non-sustainable fashion, really.
Okay, and I'm just going to do another sort of quick question to the room. I'm going to assume this is a lot of hands, but who here likes clothes? And I'm going to also, I was going to ask you who here cares about the environment. I'm going to assume from you turning up that you all care about the environment. But if I asked you who here knew what their clothes that they're wearing tonight was made from, who could say? I can, but only because I looked this morning because I knew I was going to ask this question. So, Annick, this is where you come in. You went vegan as a sort of, and then you thought, well, you know, to go the full way, you have to dress vegan.
Yes.
And then you got a bit of shock about what you might look like.
Yes.
Do you want to just talk us through
my journey?
Your journey, so to speak.
So I became vegan about 3 years ago, and so I started, the food bit was really easy, but then I started Googling things like vegan shoes and vegan bags and was just totally horrified. Because while I'm not a sort of massive fashionista in any way at all, I still like reasonably nice things. And so I was basically sort of seeing shoes that look like Cornish pasties and thinking, like, God, do I really have to wear those? And then, having never really been on Instagram before, I got onto Instagram and did a lot of research and found that there were absolutely loads of really beautiful brands producing amazing things from really innovative fabrics, not just plastics, but also things like apple leather, which my bag is made from.
Apple leather?
Apple leather, made from apple skins, waste product from apples.
Yeah, hold it up so we can... That's
apples. And Pinatex, which is made from pineapple leaves, which is also a waste product, and even just recycled plastics, which are still much better environmentally than leather. So I found basically there were loads of beautiful brands selling beautiful things, and so you don't really have to compromise, I don't think, anymore anyway, which is great.
Okay. And Roberta, to you, you are a sustainable stylist, and I had to ask you straight up, what is a sustainable stylist?
That's true. So basically I try to focus on helping people use more of what they already have, as opposed to encouraging them to go out and buy lots of new things. So typically how a stylist would earn their money would not necessarily be on the styling consultations, but it would be around the commission that you make, and you would have all these partnerships with boutiques, and your goal would be to style somebody and then get them to go and buy lots of stuff because you would make commission. I felt that that model didn't suit me and my values, because sustainability was something I was really, really passionate about. I love clothes, and I don't know, I just felt like I couldn't do that. So I wanted to really focus on helping people reimagine their existing wardrobes, focusing on, working with tailors, looking at how you could explore other options. So, I've been using Vestiaire Collective for a really long time, and you can buy beautiful things.
What's that? You nodded, but I don't know.
I've got a nod over there. Yeah, exactly.
So what's that?
So it's a premium luxury fashion site which is pre-loved. So if you have items and you are a little bit short for cash, also quite handy because you can flog them on there.
What's it called again?
Vestiaire Collective.
Vestiaire Collective.
Vestiaire Collective, yes. So it has the premium brands, everything from Gucci, Stella McCartney, through to Vivienne Westwood and some, smaller brands. So there's a lot of stuff on there, basically. But then, obviously, when you're shopping and looking for things, not all your clients actually want to shop, on platforms like that. So, things like Mary's Living and Giving, which they have their charity shops reimagined. They're trying to be more boutique-like. I volunteered in the one in Islington for a long time and started to realise actually there's more things available on the high street that are not on a designer price tag. So with that in mind, I really just tried to apply the technique of encouraging people to use what they have first, to try to shop pre-loved, and then to try to buy responsibly if you do need it brand new. And that's why I created Ethical Brand Directory, because it was blimmin' hard to find beautiful looking things that were made ethically and sustainably, and my clients kept asking me, who do you recommend, Roberta? And so my little spreadsheet, I kept emailing it to people, and I thought, well, surely I can do something a bit better. So I turned it into kind of appendices on my website, and then some ethical and fashion brands kind of got wind of it, and everybody wanted to join. So Ethical Brand Directory is its own thing now, and that just helps people think about how they can shop more sustainably, how they can shop more ethically, and really importantly for me is it gives people the opportunity to shop based on their values, not necessarily me telling them how to shop and what's right and what's wrong.
And so I'm just going to come to the room in a minute. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show some slides, some important slides, which should sort of give us an idea of where we are. The first one is the carbon footprint. They're just going to magically come up now. Here they go. There you go. The carbon footprint of the fashion industry, which is absolutely diabolical, which, you know, to me, I only recently learned about this. You know, I'm going to be completely honest, which is that I felt like the travel industry and the food industry had tons of publicity about how terrible they were, but the fashion industry had an unbelievably easy ride, given what appalling pollutant they are globally. In the UK, next slide, we are the pits. We buy more clothes per capita than any other country in Europe, 5 times the amount bought than in the 1980s.
Is there a reason for that?
Do you know, why would you put me on the spot like that? I don't know the answer to
No,
that.
it's interesting. What is it? Because our weather is so terrible. Like, why are we cheering ourselves? Why are we buying?
Why are we so terrible?
Yeah.
I'm going to write that down as the possible thing for Tortoise to explore. Why is the UK worse?
Why are we so terrible?
It's
Just a
about.
question for the ages.
And I think the third slide should show that that we're only going to get worse. So that's I mean, it's actually very hard to read, but it's a sort of 63% increase between 2015 and 2030 on the environmental impact of fashion. So that's a bit depressing. And even though there is this sort of dialogue around the fashion industry, and, you know, I don't know if anyone else has seen those sort of Extinction Rebellion stickers on the underground, there's no fashion on a dead planet. So it does feel like the dialogue is that, you know, that perhaps we might not end up in that direction. But I guess the question I would want to ask is this on us? Is this on government? What are the things that we can do? You know, so that, first of all, let's go to the sort of material issue, because I think when we talked before, there were 3 aspects of it. There's the material, and there's how it's treated, and there's a third thing.
Well, kind of everything that happens after that, really. I mean, there's lots of things. Actually, I mean, there's hundreds down to, down to packaging, down to what the energy that the stores consume. So there's so much stuff to think about. But I guess a really important thing is materials. So the same, the third slide referenced the Pulse of Fashion report. That same report looks at the impact of materials. So obviously, raw material is a really core factor in fashion. Like what's your stuff made of? And the top 4. So most people think generally cotton is probably the worst material. It's actually not. The worst
because
is
of the water consumption.
Because of the water consumption. So the worst by a mile is leather, for a number of different reasons. So leather, you know, forget even if you don't care about animals at all, just from a purely sustainability point of view, is pretty bad. Largely because of the way the raw material has to be farmed. So I think there's like 1 billion animals killed a year, 1 billion just for leather. A third of it, slightly over a third of those are cows. Cows take up a lot of space and a lot of energy. They release a lot of CO2. So about, I think, leather contributes to about 15% of global CO2 emissions. There's a lot of excrement, so 130 times that of humans without really sort of any waste treatments. And then you've got obviously all the energy needed as well. So the raw material aspect is really massive. I think the worst is silk, which I found quite surprising, then cotton, and then wool. So out of the 4, 3 are animal products.
And what about in terms of man-made, like polyester?
A third of the impact of leather. So the worst synthetic leathers, PVC, was a third.
Right. And what about in terms of breaking it down? Like polyester takes 200 years, cotton takes 10. What about leather? What does leather?
Well, the treatment of leather.
Well, and which is the second thing around treatment, really. So the raw material of leather, obviously, you couldn't wear it because it would just rot on your feet or it would rot in your hands, right? So the other reason why leather and other materials are impactful on the environment in a negative way is what then has to happen to them to turn them into something that you might wear. So in the example of leather has to be tanned. And this is where it's a huge, again, there's lots of different things. So very, very water intensive, creates a lot of waste products that go into the environment, largely because of all the chemicals that are used for tanning. So formaldehydes, coal tar, cyanides. Chromium is a particularly nasty one. So most leather is chrome tanned, very little is vegetable tan because chrome tanning is much cheaper and it creates a more flexible product. So that's why it generally happens. And then you've kind of got the other aspect, which is people. So most leather is created or worked on in the developing world. So even if you have a lovely bag that says, made in Italy, that doesn't mean it was made in Italy. That just means it was finished in Italy. So it was more than likely, just because there aren't enough people in Italy to make all the bags that are literally made in Italy, it was more than likely that the leather was produced in a developing country. And generally what happens in developing countries are leather workers are treated extremely badly. So they're often children, not paid minimum wage, or living a living wage rather, working with a stew of toxic chemicals that are generally very life-shortening, create a lot of malignancy. So it's not a particularly nice life. So those are all the different aspects. I'd say maybe the most important aspects to think about when you're looking at material. What's the raw material? How does it need to be treated to get to you and be turned into a fashion product? And what's the human aspects of the people that have to then work on that product and produce it and get it to you?
Okay, so you've obviously been in this a long time. I still feel like I am discovering, you're telling me new stuff now, and as I said, I only recently had this sort of fashion epiphany. I only recently learned that, and I feel embarrassed to say this, maybe you all know this, maybe you don't, but that polyester was exactly the same material that plastic bottles was made from. I just didn't know that, and I didn't know that it would break down in the same way. I just wondered, is anyone else going through a sort of fashion epiphany right now that they would? There's a couple of right now in this room. There's a couple of tentative hands that I'd love to go to. There's one over there. Do either of you would you talk about it?
Yeah. Okay.
What's your name? Sindhu.
It's my first thinking.
Hello, Sindhu, and welcome. First person to talk at your first thinking. You're among friends, Sindhu.
So I'm a student, and I'm definitely going through a kind of epiphany, especially when it comes to fashion. Like, I used to shop a lot, like on a lot of fast fashion, cheap websites. I think my biggest issue is, like, it's really great hearing about the things you're doing for the industry, but my biggest issue is like accessibility and price, especially as a student. Like, I just don't have that much money, and a lot of when you look online or try and find it, A, it's quite hard to research and find those things I do find, but B, it's also quite expensive. Obviously, I appreciate that, clothing when it's made ethically is paying the costs of that, so naturally it's going to be more expensive.
So in your mind, have you got used to this sort of, when you say sort of fast fashion, are you talking about sort of Topshop, Boohoo, that sort of thing?
Or not even like high street stuff, more detrimental, like I think is more detrimental, like Pretty Little Thing, ASOS, Boohoo, which I would say when I was going through when I was like 15, 16, 17, I was probably buying quite a lot of stuff on.
But in your mind, have you become accustomed to thinking that that's the sort of price of clothes? Because obviously that shouldn't be the price of clothes.
Yeah, it shouldn't.
But we've come to accept that that is a sort of possible price of clothes.
Yeah, definitely. It was like when there was that £1 bikini that went out, like, everything's so cheap. It was a bit of a shock when I started like looking into how to like shop sustainably and ethically, and I saw the prices and I was like, there's probably a reason for these prices, but my bank balance also can't afford these prices. So like that, I found it. I want to be more sustainable and ethical, and do all of these things. But if you're buying milk alternatives and trying to be more ethical that way, and then you look at the fashion industry, and that's more money. And to be honest, as a student, it's not practical or affordable, and then you feel guilty. You're like, which area do I neglect, or which area do I not be ethical in? Kind of, it's like you have to, like, otherwise what I'm just gonna live off oat milk and wear like the same like top and trousers every day because that's all I could afford for the month.
Say how it is.
I think this is a fair call. I'd love to hear all of your thoughts on this, but I just want to go to some of the other people who put their hands up, because I think this is a really valid point to a lot of people. There are a couple of other hands. There was one there. What's your name?
Louise.
Hi, Louise.
I actually went to Tortoise ThinkIn back in June about fast fashion, and it has honestly changed my perspective on it. And
Mine too.
And I haven't bought anything new bar one item since then on the 6th of June. And I was a big shopper, high street shopper, fast fashion, and so it was a huge epiphany for me. And I find myself trying to sometimes scale back my thoughts on it when I'm around friends and people that I'm close to, because I don't want to sound preachy, but it really has completely changed my perspective on how I shop.
Because once you do that, that's what I found, it's quite hard not to make a judgment on other people, and I found things like seen ASOS packages arriving at work for other people, and I thought, oh, I really don't think you should be doing that. But you don't want to be that person because you'll have no friends. and it's quite difficult, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
To not be unpopular. And there was another hand over here somewhere. Hi.
Hello.
What's your name?
My name's Tessa. Hi. For personally, it wasn't so much of an epiphany. It's something that I'd kind of done for quite a long time. However, I've got children, and when I started to look at kind of what I was then buying, kind of that I wasn't buying kind of second-hand things for them, but also they're into football and they're kind of football kits and all of that kind of sportswear. I found it really difficult to kind of impose or kind of like make decisions on their behalf and say, no, you can't have another.
So the Premier League don't do recycled cotton then?
No, but I mean, even the kind of recycled, it's still not answering the kind of problem really. So I found that kind of much more difficult, and even to kind of say to my husband, as you're saying, you're kind of like dressing it for yourself, but then kind of putting that out to kind of other people, but especially kids, and looking for clothes. I mean, the H&M Conscious range says it's 100% sustainable organic cotton, but actually they mix it with polyester. So everything that you're kind of fed suddenly, I was kind of realising actually, all the decisions I make for them are very difficult, and I don't want to take away their enjoyment of the clothes that they're wearing. So that was my experience.
So I'm just going to come back to you guys here. How do we answer these? I mean, that cost one, I think, is really key. And I think it's the same in food and travel, actually. We've done think-ins on how do you... I know that I've seen some faces here who've been at the other ones, that how do you travel well without ruining the planet, and how do we eat well? And that's come up in every single one. It's like we've got used to cheap flights, we've got used to cheap chicken, and now we've got used to cheap clothes. And how do we get unused to that now we've known it? I mean, what would your advice be?
Well, I think the first thing to do is just, I think most of us all overconsume all day, every day. And the biggest lesson for me was I found out about all the horrible things going on in the fashion industry. I looked in my wardrobe and I thought, wow, I've contributed to this. Look at all the stuff I've got. So I stopped buying things. It was a bit of a knee-jerk response. I'm so appalled with myself for shopping, relentlessly since I was 15 years old. And having a bit of a shoe addiction didn't help either. So I just said, okay, right, actually, I've got so much stuff. I wonder whether I can not buy anything new. With the exception of underwear, I draw the line at pre-loved second-hand underwear. I think it's okay. I think it's okay to buy new underwear. But apart from that, I just said, look, unless it was like an emergency situation, like I was out and a dress got caught in a taxi passing by and ripped off me, then I wouldn't buy something.
Did that actually happen?
No. But I thought to myself, what would happen? What would I do if that happened? I was like, clearly I'd have to go to the closest shop and buy something. But all of those kind of unpredictable disasters aside, I gave myself some ground rules, some boundaries about buying underwear. But if I were to buy it from an ethical and sustainable brand, and just appreciate that the cost would be higher, but I wouldn't be spending on all these other things over the course of a year. So I really focused on cost per wear, which is something that we don't think about now. We think about the fast transactional value of something, like how much it costs on the swing ticket, not how much it costs if we're going to keep it for 3 years. And if you buy good underwear, it will last you, and the cost per wear will be pennies. But we're so conditioned to obviously buy cheap things. So that was the first thing, and I also thought, okay, well, what will happen if I need to go to an event and I don't have something in my wardrobe that at that time had thousands of things in it? I thought, well, maybe I could ask a friend. Maybe I could borrow something from somebody. And so there are lots of different options out there to get started. But for me, that lesson, which was a year, and I did buy a few things. I bought a second-hand jacket. I bought new underwear. And I think I bought one other thing, which was, I was gifted something from an ethical brand. So in the course of a year, I really stopped buying stuff. And I started discovering all these things I already had in my wardrobe. And hey presto, I was like, wow, that 12 months went quite fast. I think I could do this for another year. So 2.5 years on, I rarely buy anything.
Okay.
Yeah,
You don't need it.
And I think also what you do notice if you do that is that your quality of life really doesn't go down. I mean, so I think, you know, you have that stat where we buy 5 times more things than we did in the 80s. I don't think we're necessarily, 5 times happier than we were in the 80s.
Absolutely not.
We're just conditioned to believe that we have to buy huge volumes of stuff
Absolutely.
in order to be happy and in order to be fashionable. And that's just a trick that the fashion industry has played on us.
It's just consumerism in general.
And consumerism,
yeah.
sorry, you're right, not the fashion industry,
Consumerism
in general. There was interesting I was looking at reading somewhere which was about how how innovation in the fashion industry works. There's 2 massive myths that the fashion industry tells us. One is that it's about individuality, whereas it's about the opposite, right? And the definition of a trend is something that a significant number of other people are doing. So it's the opposite of individuality. And the second thing is that it's about creativity. And again, it's so not. So if you look at lots of other industries like technology or life sciences or pharmaceuticals, stuff they were producing in the 90s is very, very different to stuff they were producing now because there's huge technological innovation. In fashion, a suit or a T-shirt or a pair of jeans looks pretty much the same as it did 20 years ago. So the way the fashion industry has enabled itself to grow is by doing 2 things. So how without innovation, how do you get people to buy more stuff? 2 things. One is marketing and advertising. So link that stuff to other things like a lifestyle. Use celebrities, use models, make you think that if you buy this, you'll therefore be like this person or have a different life. The second thing is reduce prices, and that's where fast fashion has come from. So once you kind of get that, and you get that it is just a bit of a swizz, and you break the cycle, and you realise that it doesn't make you happier, it's a bit of a, oh my God, how was I could have taken in? But everyone is, right?
But this is to Bella's point about, how it makes, you get that endorphin rush.
Yeah, I think the price thing is really interesting because I think, ethical fashion, Net-a-Porter has a section now, a vertical called, Sustain, Net-a-Porter, not Netflix, Net-a-Porter Sustain, where, it's kind of everything that's ethical and sustainable, but everything is £500, so you're kind of like, well, that's no good, and then, H&M conscious, you think you're doing this brilliant thing, and then you realise it has polyester in it, so you do feel like something that is sustainable is more expensive. So I think that is really hard. And then my other major problem that really bleaks me out, which is the same with plastic bags and flying, is that we talk about it on the individual. And actually, you're both saying these really brilliant things that make complete sense. But that means the onus is on you or me or you over there to break the cycle of fast fashion. When actually, if Boohoo and Little Thing and Zara, which dumps more clothes every week than any other shop in Britain, 150 billion garments made a year, and it's only going to get worse. And to me, that feels like, of course, everyone in this room can decide that they're not going to buy clothes or buy secondhand or be sustainable, but there seems to be really no pressure at all in the fashion industry. Even my dad the other day said, I saw a picture of the Chanel fashion show the other day, how much did that cost? It must have been hundreds of millions of pounds and plastic everywhere that's going to be thrown in the skip the next day. It doesn't feel like the pressure is on the fashion industry to do anything.
At any end of it.
No.
And actually, we talked about price, but I think the other conversation that we had is that the other thing I learnt from this is that it doesn't actually make a difference if you spend more. I mean, to some extent, if you spend more on sustainable stuff, but you can spend a lot on a luxury brand and it can be or even in mid-range, even something like M&S has a lot of, you would think wholesome M&S doesn't have any sort of damaging goods, but they do,
Always.
Always.
Actually, they're relatively good at sustainability, M&S.
They are.
Yeah.
I've seen some posters, but
they score quite well.
They score quite well.
The word sustainability, though, is slightly, what does it mean to different people? I just feel like it's such a buzzword.
Yeah.
And actually, if you're a consumer, you don't know what that covers, really, do you?
I'm going to go to these 3 hands here, starting there, and then have the lady in white, and then blue, and then blue.
It's a bit of shameless family promotion, but my brother's basically just started this app called Own Kind, and it's basically where he's digitising your wardrobes. And a lot of my friends have said, why do you need your wardrobe on your phone? But it's really cool because...
Is this like in Clueless, when she shows you the outfit? Because I have wanted that for 20 years.
He's been testing it out on me. And
Go on, tell us what it's called then.
It's called Own Kind.
Okay.
And but it's cool because it's kind of like what you were saying before about how you don't realise so much that you have in your wardrobe, and you can categorise it by evening wear, day wear, night wear, summer, winter, and he did it with my wardrobe, and I discovered so many pieces that I realised I didn't have before, and you have it on your phone the whole time. So if you're out shopping, you're like, oh, do I have a dress for this occasion? You can kind of check. But also, I think he's got, I don't know if it's got there yet, he has ideas where you can like maybe get a stylist to look through your wardrobe and like log into your thing and then help you like style you or like pick pieces for you that are like in your style without sort of going like, you know, without going completely out of crazy and like, I don't know, keeping it within and just keeping a few pieces within that. And like it's really cool, and you can create events being like, I've got a meeting tomorrow and I need formal wear, and you can like look through what you have and you can like create and plan outfits and so, and I think like it kind of fits in with this.
It's actually like, using the stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
This lady here.
So I think that I have an ethical and sustainable accessories company that works with women-led artisans all over the world. So the idea is economic empowerment of women. But what gets me very angry about all of these discussions is, as you've raised before, it's like the effort is put on the consumer. It shouldn't be put on the consumer. There has to be regulation. And in terms of the fashion industry, they should cost in the environmental cost of every single product they make, because what they're doing is they're basically making a country in India or Bangladesh, they're making them pay the price for the garment. And then everybody's moaning about, oh, you know, and then you get comments like Andrea Ledson saying today about why are people moaning about extinction and climate change here when they should be doing it over there. It's like, we're doing that. We are doing that damage over there to those communities. The second thing is clothes aren't made as well as they were before, and it doesn't matter the price you're paying for them. The quality of the stitching, the quality of the fabric has gone down. So even if you do buy fashion and want to hold on to it for a long time, you know, I've got jeans that I've worn out in 3 years. Jeans shouldn't wear out in 3 years. They shouldn't. They should last a lot longer than that. And that, again, it's just not acceptable. And until those things change, it's going to be very hard for consumers to make them changes themselves.
We need to be a bit like we used to be, which was when things were made better. And
that you pay a higher price for them, but they last.
What's your name?
Jennifer.
And what was your name?
Lucy.
Right. Okay. Thanks. And the lady in blue, and then my colleague Pauline, and this lady, and then I have to go to this side of the room, so I feel like I'm being. What's your name?
Charlotte.
Charlotte.
I think two things. I'll go fast. I think particularly just back to a lovely student here, I completely understand where you're coming from, and there shouldn't actually have to be such an onus on price, because whilst everyone sort of has discussed this idea that, yeah, there are really ethical brands, and yes, they do cost a lot more, there's actually so many clothes that already exist that you can buy. So secondhand is one of the best places you could purchase anything, and you can get really amazing clothing that is, as you say, made a lot better. That was made everything I'm wearing is from a charity shop or some charity online or whatever. But as you said, exactly, things aren't made as well anymore because there is this idea of fast fashion and whatever there might be. And I think with your generation particularly, if you stop buying from the high street stores and you get the word out about Mary's Living or the amazing curated like Instagram accounts that only sell secondhand, or websites that are out there and that do exist, and it does feel like you're on a boutique website, it is really easy. It's just about talking. So the people who were sort of saying, oh, I don't want to sound preachy, actually there's a really good way of doing it without sounding preachy and just saying, oh my god, like I got this pair of shoes and it was on this and it was 10 quid and they're from the 80s and they're really beautiful, Celine or something. And it's a really good way to open up that conversation. And I haven't bought anything new for pretty much since I moved.
You preach in a good way, though, right?
That's why I do, for sure.
But your friend's complimenting your preaching, so you can do without losing.
I mean, I work with her, so she has to deal with me.
Well, you were going to talk next. What's your name?
I'm Shannon, and my comment was actually, sorry, I can't remember your name. Jennifer, to kind of play devil's advocate to what you'd said, and we don't just think the same because we're sitting next to each other, but I think if we as consumers want all the benefits of convenience and cheap price, then we also have to own the fact that our decision does have an impact. And I think that's the same of whether you're dealing with big food or big pharma or fashion. We do have an effect that is the result of our decisions. So yes, of course, the big guys, them with their huge billion-dollar budget sheets and P&Ls, they're going to affect huge change in one step. But with our small steps, you know, we can, and I think we shouldn't be afraid to let that drive our decisions, and shouldn't be afraid to stand out from the crowd, or, you know, we don't look too left-wing or hippie or whatever it is if we just want to not eat meat once a week or shop at a charity shop. But I think we do need to own the fact that it is on us, as well as the mobsters in the boardrooms kind of thing.
I do agree with you, but I think a lot of people think it's on us too much, but I need to go to Polly over here, who's waiting for ages.
So I'm Polly, I work with Merope, and she came in 2 days last week and looked at me and went, is that new?
See?
So,
I'm awful. I'm dreadful.
But I mean, I want to say the precise opposite to what you said, really, which is that I feel a kind of rising panic in this conversation. I'm like, I can never be like you. I can't imagine a world in which I would take that much time to really make the amazing choices that you make. And I still don't think me doing that would be enough. There has to be political and economic change about this. I don't think it's down to individuals, because if everyone in this room changed, there's lots of people who wouldn't. This needs to be fair across society as well. So I think the change we can make is the political pressure to get some regulation on these industries.
Okay, and I promise to go to this side. Oh, I'll go via the middle. There's two hands here.
I wanted to say...
What's your name?
My name's Camilla. The first thing is that I am wearing a pair of jeans that I thought were quite expensive when I bought them about 4 years ago. And today, devastatingly, they've got a hole in them for the first time. I was speaking to my friend next to me, and she said, can't you just mend them? I feel like maybe is something that's, I mean, definitely sort of lost in our education system.
Do you know how to mend them?
Exactly, no. Speaking to my dad, he tells me about when he was younger, he would darn his socks and things like that, and I feel like that's a kind of an art that's lost. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of it, isn't it? We used to have things were made better, they costed more, and you learnt how to mend them, and now you value them more.
Yeah, that's the chicken and egg thing. Of did fast fashion companies clock that they could manipulate you into thinking that you're going to feel happier, and therefore pile you on the stuff, or was there a demand? Because it feels like we were not driving the demand. It's more like the other way around. I think.
Did they not create the demand?
They did. They created the demand, but so it's not that you forgot. You know, it's not that you're worse than your dad. It's that you were then raised with this idea that you didn't need to have a pair of jeans that lasted. You know, the generation older than us has a completely different perspective on it. But I do think Polly's right. I think it all does boil down to these companies, which ASOS. I just how can you feel powerful, engaged, and like you're doing something? I don't buy from ASOS. I don't buy from online. I don't buy fast fashion.
Which is ordinarily a British company that I think that would be celebrated as a British economic success.
Yeah, and it's not so
an environmental disaster.
Blah, blah, but I don't buy any of that. I still feel powerless in the face of, as Polly says, we could stop doing it. 80% of the people won't stop doing it.
But I think that it's really important that you live your values. So if you believe in something, it's one thing to talk about it, and yes, you can go online and vote and sign a petition, but you also have to embody that. That's why I'm a big believer in saying, like, wear your values. You're absolutely right. Just because I decided to do something differently, not even a penny in the ocean. But what happens is when small groups of people that feel very passionately about certain subjects, look at Extinction Rebellion, that was a small group and it's gathered momentum. Because what's happening is by you sticking to your guns and believing in something, it forces people to take notice. So it's not about, I don't believe it's just down to the individual to change the fashion industry. I think that's impossible because of the scale of the industry. But I think we can feel confident in ourselves and what we're doing and have that conviction that we're doing the best we can do as an individual, and then we must support other organisations like Fashion Roundtable, Fashion Revolution, get involved. What do you
think about half measures? Because I would say that you're coming here and I'm quite in awe of how much you think about it and do about it. I think I do half measures.
So I think you've got to start
So
somewhere.
my jacket is like reconstituted, repurposed leather.
Hey, I'm
My
wearing
bag is
leather.
old. Right.
I'm wearing leather.
And I don't buy, fast fashion, fall apart, all of that stuff. And I'm a vegetarian. So, by the way, I think you can shame people a little bit. I think you're allowed to be a bit like, you need to, I'm a bit shamey about being a vegetarian. So is it okay to be, if I'm living my values, and my values are, I can't think about every single thing that I wear.
Absolutely. There's no room for like eco guilt and
That's the
eco
thing,
shaming.
then you feel helpless if you can't go all the way.
No, but who can? There's not a single business or person on the planet that is 100% ethical or 100% sustainable. That unicorn doesn't exist. And we have to stop comparing ourselves to the impossible. Now, if you just think 95% of the population are not engaging, 5% are trying to do something differently, what if that 95% decided to do things 1% differently? Mass change. So if everybody does one small thing differently, yes, we need, we have a timeline. There's impending climate change, but we shouldn't forget the power of what we can do when we unite together in shared beliefs, because it has, revolutions have, created all the change in the past, and I think fashion revolution is the start of organisations going, oh crap, actually there's a lot of people out here that don't don't and they want to see change.
And they're starting it.
Massive difference.
Yeah, it really has.
Starting
Totally
it, but
has.
there's a lot of greenwashing.
Yeah, look, 2018 was the year that, do you agree?
Yeah.
2018 was the year that those of us that have been sort of, championing this, finally we started to see things like, people signing different accords, government starting to take notice, suddenly companies going, oh crap, maybe we need to think about sustainability.
I mean, just think of how many major fashion brands now have completely dropped fur.
Yeah.
Have dropped things like Fora and mohair. Have started doing GOTS or any kind of certified organic cotton. They haven't done it out of the kindness of their own hearts. They've done it because there's been enough pressure from informed people. There doesn't have to be the whole world, just enough. A significant amount of informed people.
But sustainability, it feels like you have to keep your foot on the gas the whole time, because sustainability also means like ethical concerns about people, as you said.
Yeah.
But things like Rana Plaza, which was such a, how many years ago was Rana Plaza announced?
2014, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I think 2013, 2014.
And at that point I remember everyone going, okay, well, this is the most evil, terrible, awful thing in the world, but how many people actually check the labels of their clothes to see where they're made? So it's not just the environmental thing, it's also...
I wondered whether labelling is a sort of potential... You remember how the sort of nutritional labelling had that simple kind of green light system, the red and the yellow and the green? I
don't think that worked then.
Oh, does it not work?
I don't think it did work.
I would like to see, because I think when you talk about, you've got to think about the material, and then you've got to think about how it's treated, and you've got to think about how it's, created.
Yeah.
And you think, you go in there, the idea, people look at the label, what can they get from that? They can't, you could get the fact you would look,
the cruelty-free side.
There's nothing.
The label wouldn't even tell you anything. Right?
Exactly.
Whether it's from a, one or another.
What you said about Italy was so interesting, because everything made in Italy isn't really made in Italy. Is kind of quite a revealing thing. There's a hand over here.
Hi there.
What's your name?
Ben.
Sorry, Ben.
Ben, yeah. I started a company. We work with multinational household fashion labels, and we're trying to build out parallel, on-demand supply chains for these big businesses. And I think we started trying to talk about this in terms of you should be more sustainable and reduce your waste, but none of these businesses care about that. And I think really, on an individual basis, these companies are so big that they're trying to make individual little changes, but no one knows what to do. So I think there's a lot of focus on material, because it seems easy, and it seems like as consumers we can make choices about that. But at the end of the day, it's, how wasteful are these companies? Really, fundamentally, there's too much stuff made. It doesn't actually matter what it's made from if you're making too much of it. Yes, we can make stuff out of a better material. There's also a load of greenwashing about kind of the this new sustainable material, but it's that's not the answer. And I think really there's just this lack of knowledge and lack of motivation on a top level. So I can't see a way that it's going to change without regulation. But I think it's so late in the game that everyone has to do everything they can, otherwise it's too late, really.
What would regulation look like? I mean, could you say to Pretty Little Thing, you can only make 50 new things a season? What would it look like? Would you have to
You've got your hand up because you got an answer to that.
I think regulation on a very basic level is that the initial steps where they've started saying now if you're a larger business, think if your income's over 300 million a year, you have to show that there's no forced labour in your supply system.
So that's the bare minimum.
That's the bare minimum. There was a big panel that recommended to the government they needed to do a lot more about transparency within the whole supply chain, and unfortunately the government chose not to take up that regulation. But I think probably the biggest first step would be producing completely transparent supply chains and costing that in. So, for example, when you have a pair of jeans made, there should be an environmental cost dependent on the cotton and the dyes and making sure the water is cleaned after. That should be within that whole supply chain and costed into the products that you're making. And I think once that starts to happen, then not only will businesses will be far more aware because it will have a cost to them. And at the moment, they're not paying that cost. And once you start getting that transparency through and that governmental regulation coming through, which is coming, it's going to happen within the next 3 to 5 years, I think, but the sooner the better, then you'll start seeing a big shift because they'll understand, the companies will start having to pay an environmental cost for the products that they're making. Which
and also, is it Jane?
Jennifer,
sorry.
And that cost will then get passed on to the consumer, and I actually think that's a very good thing, because again, we have to remember the reason we buy so much shit is because it's so cheap. It's not because companies want it to be more affordable, it's because they want us to buy very, very high volumes of products. So in the same way that, putting a cost on plastic bags has massively reduced the usage of plastic bags, we're not going around going, but it's my human right to have loads of plastic bags.
Which the supermarkets hugely fought at the time.
Yeah, and it's made a massive difference. It makes a difference when you do it to alcohol, it makes a difference when you do it to cigarettes, it makes a difference to everything. The quickest way to stop people doing something that is bad for everyone is to make it less affordable to do it on a grand scale. That makes a big difference.
I mean, and remember that companies have it factored into the manufacturing and production that items are not designed to last for 100 wears, or 30 wears. They're designed to fall apart. So that you do consume them, and I think I said this.
What's affordable about that? That's terrible.
I mean, so you consume and you chuck it away like an old takeaway wrapper. You wear it a few times. Oh, you can pull the seams apart. You can see through it. You go, oh, it's not. It was so cheap. It would cost me more to repair it.
Where's the lady with the jeans? All in your jeans. Do you mind me asking how much they did cost you?
Yeah, I think they're Acne, so I mean, I think I got them in the sale, but they were still over 100 quid, which for me, compared to
No, that's a lot for jeans. That's a lot. And are you going to mend them?
They're my absolute favourite pair of jeans, and they're the most comfortable things I own, so I think I might sort of...
After this, are you going to mend them?
Do you have tailors on your
Yes. There is... Oh, gosh, I can't remember Lulu's thing. Tell me... I'll tell you towards the end. I'll get their clothes doctor.
There's a recommendation from the clothes doctor here.
Lulu.
Okay.
My mum will do it for you.
Very affordable.
Hands at the back, the lady in stripes and the lady in purple.
I was going to say the Restory are really good for handbags and that kind of thing.
Yes, they sort of can repurpose all leather goods and all. Yeah.
Shoe menders often can as well. Shoe menders. Dry cleaners.
Yeah, I had shoes rehealed the other day and thought this feels like a novelty, which is absurd.
We're used to working with leather.
Lady in purple.
Just think about us buying 5 times more clothes than we did in the 1980s.
Yeah.
I'm really aware, sitting in this room, maybe I'm wrong, but my impression is I'm surrounded by lots of people who say they like clothes and fashion, but mostly people are wearing black, grey, maybe navy, or white. There's a really yes. So there's a really interesting paper by Danny Miller, who's an anthropologist, and he says, why have we all gone to wearing black? And his argument is that perhaps we're less confident in our own views and our own personalities than we used to be, and so we want to be more conformist.
Do we wear more black than we used to?
I don't know, but I think that's a really interesting question. And I wonder to what extent. I imagine most of us are buying black. When we're buying clothes, then there is black in our wardrobe. I wonder to what extent we're actually sort of not satisfied because we're buying black, and it's you have to do it because it's safe. And whether that is part of it.
It's quite interesting. Obviously, I'm trained colour analysis, so I do colours for people. I actually wear a lot of...
Like if someone's a winter.
Yes. So I basically...
My mum has her colours.
Yeah. Like, yeah. So you find out. Yeah. You find out whether your undertones are warm and cool, and it helps you understand what colours are going to work best in your wardrobe. So by understanding that, and so one of the reason why I hated colour analysis originally was because a lot of people that do colour analysis are not personal stylists. And I used to see a lot of people like wearing twin sets, and I thought, oh my God, I don't want to wear like 5 shades of purple type of thing. I just thought, oh, like I'm creative. But I actually realised it's a very useful tool for sustainability, because when you know your colours, you start to eliminate buying items that won't match the rest of your wardrobe. I'm a cool winter, so I'm really lucky. I can wear black and white, so that made my wardrobe quite easy. But a lot of people go to black and white items because they're widely available, and because they lack the confidence to wear colour, because they don't know what colours work well, and it's safe. And for a lot of people, they perceive it to be slimming, and it's this uniform.
Is that a myth? It's not slimming. I want to know.
Well, it depends on your undertones. So very few people can actually pull off black and white.
Ah. Good to know.
Can I say counterpoint that I almost only wear bright colours? Today I'm a little muted, but my whole...
You have to justify your outfit.
You look great in what you're wearing.
I don't think I'm a cool winter though, now I'm really stressed about it.
For a warm summer. Get your colours done. There was a couple of hands here. There's a woman at the front and then the man in the white t-shirt.
Hi, I'm Karen.
Karen.
And I'm thinking about how, like, what you've said, all of you, is that what is sustainability, really? That's what I'm wondering. And there are so many complicated factors. If I buy boots and they're from fake leather, how are they made? Where is it from? Is it partly in Thailand, and then maybe the laces are from China, and there's so many components and so much. And what I'd like to know is what's the most important thing for me to think about? Because water, production.
We don't have such a good question. I want to know the answer.
I think this is a conundrum that we all face every day, and it takes a lot of time for you to actually figure out what's really important to you. Veganism, really important to you. Sustainability, for me, is defined as me consuming less and using more of what already exists in all types of materials. So whilst I'm not vegan, obviously, I've said that twice, but I do wear leather, but I try to use pre-loved leather, okay? So, because it's already in existence, and I feel like it's a waste not to utilise it, and if there are items that are already made of leather already, then I will continue using them and give them more life. So you kind of have to figure out what really resonates for you and what's really most important. Yeah. And that, we all face these challenges all the time. And, for me, sustainability is the key driver about minimising the impact on the environment and minimising how much stuff I own and not buying new things because that's a drain on our natural resources.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, you may. You are.
So in my other life, I'm a runner, and I think sportswear is probably one of the most terrible things, for the environment. So there's a thing where I give my shoes in at the end of their life cycle, and they get given away or repurposed, so that's good. I have some leggings that were remade from other fabrics, but I don't want to buy second-hand sportswear.
No, but you can. I think the challenge with sportswear, as I think you'll agree, is anything that's made polyester-based, lycra, is great for wicking moisture away from the body and keeping us feel comfortable, but it's not great. So it comes back to the problem with material again. Man-made fibres shed millions of microfibres when you put them in the washing machine. So here we are thinking we're doing a great thing, and then every time we do a wash, we're actually contributing to another environmental hazard. So
You can get little bags that you can.
I've got my guppy bag. I've got my guppy friend.
Guppy bag.
Guppy bag.
Guppy friend,
It's called a guppy
yeah.
bag, and you wash something. We like to be practical here as well. You put things in the guppy bag, and you wash it with, and it stops the microplastics
So it's
going
not,
into.
so I can wash my leggings.
Yes,
Guppy bag.
absolutely.
I've got to go to the man in white because we're running out of time, and then the lady here.
So I'm Duncan, this is my first thinking.
Welcome, Duncan.
I just wanted to say thank you so much for outlining at the beginning like all of those stats that I just didn't know about different kinds of material and what are involved in that. Like I think there's so little education, like I didn't know that, like I was having an epiphany earlier. But I think that's so key, and like the idea as well about having some kind of labelling as well. It's just how do we measure and then action companies taking account of the full environmental costs. I have an economics background, and it's like this age-old problem of kind of internalising the externalities that are like the problem, and I think it has to be through political pressure. And I know maybe like a lot of people are kind of passionate about the environment but not necessarily political, but I think it has to be like, it really has to be coupled with like getting politicians to take action, and everyone kind of has to become political to see that that regulation is put in place.
Thank you, Duncan. I'm going to go. This is the last hand for the flags come up, but she got in there just before.
I'm Hannah. I'm Sindhu's flatmate, actually, so it's all in one circle.
Just bookmarked the whole event.
Hannah was my preacher. Yeah. I did my undergraduate in sustainable development, so I've been having conversations like this for a really long time. And I think it's really interesting about people being like, oh, like, what should we care about? Like, what's really important? And people like panicking over here and like all this sort of stuff. And I think, I think that it's really, if you're in the system, you're complicit to the system. Like, to be part of it, you're accountable to it, but you're also within it to change it. And I think a lot in the terms of activism and things like that, and environmentalism, there's lots of people who are like, you have to be all sustainable or nothing. And it's basically impossible to be within the, like, be on your sustainable journey without being a hypocrite at some point. Yeah. Like, if you want to see the problem, you're going to have to fly, and then in that case, you're like being a hypocrite in that sense. And I think it's really important to take like small steps. If you're in the system, you're going to be a hypocrite at some point, and that's okay. And I think that's just what.
Thank you, Annick. It is my duty to try and attempt to do a small sum up of this event, which is quite hard because you're all brilliant, but I'm going to just do a small thing. I'm sorry if I missed you out. I would like to give a little shout out to Sindhu for starting us with her point about, you know, the cost of being ethical and just being honest about that and your own shopping habits, because I think you speak for a lot of people when you say that, you know, the cost has come down and you want to be better, but it's expensive and you don't know how. And I think that's a really important thing as we're going ahead and looking at this journalistically. It's very cheering to hear from the number of people who have actually changed their habits in this room. It was quite a lot of people, and shout outs particularly to Louise, who changed her habit exactly at the same time as I did, because we did another event where this came up, and it's really wonderful to hear people sort of hearing about the subject and feeling really compelled to take action from it. Tessa, I know how hard it is with kids. Where are you? How hard it is with kids. I have them as well, and it's quite hard to persuade them not to go down to the Harry Potter Primark section and say, oh, it's killing the planet. You know, they want that, you know, Gryffindor t-shirt. But I will try and shame them. And I think it is, you know, someone said you can shame people, and it is sort of our job to shame people. And obviously you two are shaming each other, or not shaming, you've managed to preach in a really positive way, and that's obviously something that's come out of this. And actually I think all of you guys here at the panel have preached in a really positive way that I think will have an effect on everyone who's come here. I think the sort of demons of the piece here are the fashion brands who we learned, you know, dump huge amounts of clothes, who make things badly and are doing a kind of terrible greenwashing job. But at least it is a step in the right direction. It's quite clear that we, as a population, Britain, but the world, but particularly Britain, we over-consume, and that needs to be addressed. And the question that keeps coming up at all of these how to live well things, it's come up again, is that a government responsibility to stop us consuming, or is it personal responsibility? Polly, Bella, Ben, Duncan, you all sort of argued quite heavily for the government side, and Roberta, you sort of quite compellingly talked about how if everyone does a small thing that's different, that is a revolution in itself, and you have to live your values. And I think you're both right, but we do know that regulation works and that something has to break the cycle. In terms of what we'll go away and think about for Tortoise, what you put me on the spot right at the start. Why is the UK such an enormous consumer? I really want to know that now, so we'll certainly look into that. On a small point, I really want to know if we're wearing more black than we used to. But on a bigger subject, all of these, as I said, this is part of a series. You know, can we eat well and not ruin the planet? Can we dress well? Can we travel well? And what we want to do is come up with a sort of practical guide for everything that you can do, so that all of our members and readers can look at that and actually learn something from it. One thing I will take away that I really liked, which is that sustainability can be different for different people, and as long as you're sort of doing your bit, you're doing something. And I think that was the note that we ended on there, that along the way we are going to be hypocrites, but we just need to be a bit better. So thank you all for your contributions. If you are not a member of Tortoise and this has excited you and wanted to make you a member of Tortoise, please do come and see me afterwards, where I have a code which will make the whole thing a steal. Thank you very much for coming along and contributing.